Welcome back to part 2 of our exploration of Bronze and Iron Age Greece. In our previous video, we explored the Bronze Age civilizations of the peoples living in and around the Aegean Sea, including the Cycladic Islands, Cyprus, and the Minoans on Crete. We're now going to turn our attention to mainland Greece and look at the Mycenaeans. Once again, a quick note that the exact dates for this period may vary depending on the archaeological or scholarly source you consult. Here we go. Located in mainland Greece, or Hellas, the Mycenaean civilization had its beginnings around the 1900s BCE, when a group of Indo-Europeans settled in mainland Greece. Mycenae is said to be the home of the mythical king Agamemnon, and the age has often been viewed by the Greeks as the Age of Heroes, because it is thought that this was the period in Greek history when the Trojan War, as told by the Greek poet Homer, may have taken place. You may have noticed that the farther back in time we go, the more difficult it becomes to try and separate myth from history, but more on that in a bit. Remember our first video when we discussed that no one has yet figured out how to read Linear A? Well, a second form of writing emerged during the Bronze Age, known as Linear B. This one has been deciphered and is considered the earliest evidence of the written Greek language. Linear B tablets provide us with a window into the lives of Mycenaean Greece during this time. Mind you, most of the tablets were inventories of possessions, but they nevertheless reveal some interesting clues about the Mycenaeans. Just like Sir Arthur Evans excavated Minoan sites on Crete, so too did another famous archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann excavate around the region of Mycenae in 1876. In particular, he discovered the remains of a thriving 2nd millennium BCE culture that included a fortress and several rich tombs, including a set of tombs where the Mycenaeans appeared to have buried their rulers. Thanks to a local shepherd, he also unearthed another set of tombs that dated from around between 1600 and 1500 BCE. He called these tombs tholos, or tholoi in the plural. Tholoi were deep graves cut into rocks and approached by a corridor known as a dromos. As you can see from the shape of these tombs, they resembled beehives, and so sometimes they were also referred to as beehive tombs. The way in which the stones are stacked provided great stability for the structure and allowed the builders to make these tombs quite large in size. As with the Cycladic civilization, it's not that easy to deduce clues as to the Mycenaean society or their beliefs about death, but one thing is for sure, the materials found in these burial sites, and especially the royal graves, were exceptionally rich, with numerous beautifully crafted gold items. The most famous artifact excavated by Schliemann is what's known as the gold mask of Agamemnon. Now, here's where the intersection of archaeology and mythology become interesting. Prior to excavating in Mycenae, Schliemann had conducted an archaeological dig in modern Turkey and thought that he had discovered the remains of Homer's mythical city of Troy. It turns out that there were a lot of historical and archaeological complications to his discoveries, a video for another time. But back to Mycenae. Upon his discovery of these rich Mycenaean tombs, Schliemann thought that he had found the grave of the mythical king Agamemnon, who had fought in the Trojan War. It has since been proven, though, that these Mycenaean tombs are about 3 centuries older than the period during which the Trojan War would have taken place. So, unfortunately, modern archaeology has disproved that Schliemann's findings could correspond to the mythical time of the Trojan War. This should nevertheless not diminish the significance of Schliemann's findings. The Mycenaean civilization was a fascinating one, especially its palaces. Its palaces were usually a fortress surrounded by ramparts, also known as defensive walls, typically with a walkway, at whose heart lay the central hall known as the Megaron. Around it, you would have found a secondary hall, private quarters, and some workshops. The fortress itself was well fortified, in addition to the ramparts, with a monumental entrance to the palace here, the palace at Mycenae, known as the Lion Gate. In fact, this gate here at the Palace of Mycenae was designed to impress visitors, with its heraldic lions sitting atop an 18-ton lintel made of a monolith. Monolith is a fancy term for single large stone. And the walkway approaching the gate also served as a defensive mechanism. invaders would be forced into this narrow passage that would not only constrain their numbers and movement, but also make them easy targets for defending soldiers stationed atop the ramparts. The king of a Mycenaean palace, known as a Wanax, certainly knew what he was doing. Although we don't know that much about Mycenaean society and culture, what we do know is this. Economically, their subsistence was based on agriculture and raising animals, with perhaps some hunting thrown in. Objects and artworks found from that time period indicate that there was trade and therefore influence between Mycenae and the rest of the Greek world, including the Minoans. Their quest for metals such as copper, tin, lead, and gold took them around the Mediterranean, including such places as Cyprus, Portugal, Cornwall, Thrace, Attica, and the East. Tablets found in the Mycenaean palaces also indicate that deities who would later be honored in the Greek pantheon, such as Dionysus here, were already being worshipped at this time, and this leads us to believe that the system of complex polytheism was already starting to develop. The Mycenaeans also strike us as a warlike people. Some notable features of Mycenaean warfare include the fact that they seem to have chariots, and they wore a distinctive conical-shaped helmet made out of boar tusks. Hard and sturdy, it was no doubt an effective way to protect the noggin. Around the end of the 13th century BCE, we find that these Mycenaean palaces were destroyed. 3 possible factors may have contributed to the gradual abandonment of these settlements. Civil wars between the Mycenaean princes, natural phenomena such as earthquake or climate change, or invasion, thought to have been by an Indo-European people known as the Dorians, who began settling in the region around that time. Whatever the reason, with the collapse of the Mycenaean world, writing also disappeared, and thus began a period known as the Dark Ages, or Greek Middle Ages. During this period, Greece was fairly depopulated, and there was not much advancement in terms of its art. Then came the Iron Age. Around the 11th century BCE, things started heating up again in terms of Greek civilization. Pottery styles, which had fallen by the wayside, started developing again. A style of pottery, known as proto-geometric, began emerging. It was simple enough, with pottery showing decorative patterns of circles, semicircles, triangles, and wavy lines. Iron was also gradually replacing bronze at this time. All the better for the Greeks, since zones for mining iron were more convenient than the ones for copper or tin that were needed to make bronze. It was also during the Iron Age that the Greeks started emigrating in small groups from mainland Greece to begin settling in colonies all around the Mediterranean world. Perhaps this was owing to an increase in population or a scarcity of resources, or both. If you look back at our video on Athenian democracy, you'll recall that some of the settlements included regions in Sicily, southern Italy, and Asia Minor, whose colonists would later be known as the Ionian Greeks, as well as some settlements in Egypt, Spain, and Gaul, like Marseille. Important Greek sanctuaries also began appearing at this time, including those at Dodona, where you would find the oracle of Zeus, and Delphi, Apollo's oracle and the seat of the Pythia in Greece. There were also sanctuaries at Olympia, ancient home of the Olympic Games in the Peloponnese, and the Heraion in Samos, the first Greek temple built in honor of Hera. After the proto-geometric period, there soon came the geometric period in Greek art, characterized by horizontal bands filled with patterns such as those created by zigzags and triangles. You can see here how the artists used lines, circles, triangles to depict the figures of animals and humans. Eventually, these at first simple patterns developed into longer, more complex artistic scenes, often depicting a story such as battle scenes, dances, heroic exploits, or even a funeral scenes. Here you see an example of one such funeral scene, known as a prothesis, or laying out of the corpse. Once again, the scene is created using the geometric shapes characteristic of this late Iron Age period. This brings us to the end of the Iron Age. In the late 9th and early 8th centuries BCE, there was a demographic increase in population in Greece. Things started picking up again, and it was around this time that a new system of Greek writing emerged. The old Mycenaean system of linear B had disappeared with the collapse of Bronze Age Mycenae, except in Cyprus, and the Greeks started playing around with a new writing system that included the use of an alphabet. Inspired by the Phoenicians, who were a famous seafaring civilization that colonized many parts of the Mediterranean and that had developed its own consonantal writing system, the Greeks borrowed the Phoenician alphabet, making a few modifications to accommodate for vowels, and voila, they gave birth to the Greek alphabet. Fun fact, the alphabetic writing system we use today in English is derived from the Roman alphabet, which was itself inspired by the Greek one. This reinvention of writing during the 8th century altered the Greeks' way of thinking, and with it came the desire to start writing down some of the great stories and epics sung by the traveling bards known as rhapsodos or aoidos. Homer was one such bard who was said to have set stories and hymns in writing in the second half of the 8th century BCE. Although the veracity of his existence cannot be proven for certain, the Iliad and the Odyssey have nevertheless come down to us as two of the greatest pieces of early Western literature. Well, that's it for this lengthy installment on the ancient world. Tune in next time for more fun facts. Thanks for watching.